It's another edition of Time About the Movies, and today we're taking a look at the movies on November 1st, 2002. Only two movies to look at today, so let's go ahead and get right to it. And we'll start off with easily the biggest new release of the holiday season, the big holiday release of the movie season to come, and that is Tim Allen returning as the Santa Claus in The Santa Claus 2. Well, it's technically not called the Mrs. Claus, even though it is in the trailer. And sometimes it was, I think the original title was actually Santa Claus 2, the Mrs. Claus, but then they took the Mrs. Claus out of it. But the movie clearly is about the Mrs. Claus, is being part of the big storyline here. As Scott Calvin, once again played by Tim Allen, has been Santa Claus for a couple of years now. But now he has to deal with a number of different things. He has to deal with his son, who has now become a teenager and has become more of a nuisance to his school. And not only that, Scott has to find somebody to marry him as part of the deal to become Santa Claus. As it says on the card in the trailer there, it's the Mrs. Claus, where he basically decides to fall in love with Scott's principal or teacher. I can't remember what was I think it's a principal. Yeah, principal. Elizabeth Mitchell, who you've seen in a number of different things, most notably Lost. And while this is going on, Scott basically decides to create a robotic Santa in his place while he's doing this. And then there's these other elements too, like we get to see all the holiday figures that meet up every once in a while. They've added them into here, and you got Mother Nature, played by Aisha Tyler, Father Time, played by Peter Boyle, the Easter Bunny, played by Jay Thomas, Kevin Pollak plays Cupid, Michael Dorn is Sandman. I mean, there's all these different elements being added into this movie, which, in the long run, does hurt the film overall when it's all said and done. I don't think this is as good of a sequel as I think they wanted to. There's definitely too much story going on in this particular movie, but in the film's defense, there are elements to it where it does actually have a lot of different unique ideas to it. Like, I like the idea of seeing the North Pole like this, because it was very different compared to what was in the first movie. You can definitely tell there is more of an emphasis on adding a little bit more design to the world of the North Pole. Like, feels like kind of the inspiration was taken from a little bit of some of the Rankin Bass stuff, which, you know, something like the Rankin Bass, not like how Elf would do it a year later, but you could definitely tell that there was more emphasis on making the North Pole look more legitimate, like look more than just a regular place out in the middle of nowhere. And, you know, it does lead to some really cool ideas, really interesting elements to it. Like, I love the idea that, you know, anytime a plane flies through and everybody in the North Pole notices that, they're basically just like, they have to figure out how to keep the noise down and all that to make it sound like there's nothing there. Like, I like that kind of idea that they have in here. And I do like the idea of Scott having to figure out how to woo this woman, even though he's already been married before, but now he has to do this again, knowing for the fact that if he does it, he basically doesn't become Santa anymore. And it does lead to a lot of ideas that really, like, there are definitely a lot of story elements in this particular movie that definitely fall flat. Like, there's too much stuff going on in this movie, and it really does feel like they're trying too hard to appeal strictly to the kids. Like, they have characters that are specifically in this movie to be like little distractions for the kids. Like, there's a reindeer named Chet who is very much a rookie reindeer in the making. He's not really all that. Like, he's not as memorable. Like, he's not as what do I want to say here? He's essentially a reindeer in training. Like, he's supposed to be like a character that the kids can relate to. Well, you also have this other kid character played by Lillian Mooney, who was also Myrtle in the Lilo and Stitch movies, as this other character that you're also having the kids kind of be behind. And it definitely does feel like they're adding a little bit too much more into the film to kind of keep you. It's more distracting than I think they're trying to let on. It's something that I feel like if they had truncated it down a little bit, maybe the movie could have been something as good as the original film. But like I said, it's not a bad movie. It just has those elements there where they put the effort to try to make this better than the original film and show more of a production value is definitely there. But the story and adding some elements to the film that really does not add up to make you more confused than entertained from what you're seeing. I mean, there's a lot of elements in here where they add so many different they add so many different characters and different stories, side plots going on here that they just don't feel like they add to the overall fun factor of the film. Like, it's one of those movies where, as much as I like the first Santa Claus movie enough, but the sequels, this is probably the second best one of the series, with the third one being the weakest of the three. And it's not like they're not trying here. You can definitely see that they are clearly trying to have something here that's a little bit of an evolution from the original film, but it just doesn't quite have that spark that the first movie had. Like, you could still go back and look at that first movie and still find a lot of elements in there that make that movie work as well as it does. But here, those elements are still there sporadically. They're not they're not as much all over the place, and the stuff that they do try to add to it does kind of fall apart pretty quickly, and it does kind of ruin the ebb and flow of the enjoyment factor of the movie. So for the most part, I thought the sequel was just okay, but unlike the first film, where it's one I'd watch more on occasion once every holiday season, this is one that I kind of watch every other couple of years or something like that. Like, it's not a top priority when I'm looking through the movies that I have to watch every single year for the holidays. Not even the third film, honestly. But if it's on, if there's nothing else on during the holiday season, it's definitely something that I would say I'd probably watch once every couple of years, but I wouldn't make it a top priority to watch every Christmas like I would do with the first film. But that's just my personal take on the Santa Claus 2. So, with that said, let us move on to the second film we have here, and that is Owen Wilson and Eddie Murphy in I Spy. Well, to Eddie Murphy's credit, this is probably his best overall film he made in 2002, and even then, that's not really saying a whole lot when you consider Showtime and Adventures of Pluto Nash, and look at how well those turned out. But this is based off the television series from the 1960s that starred Robert Culp and Bill Cosby. This time you have Owen Wilson and Eddie Murphy in those roles, where you have a spy and a famous civilian boxer going undercover to prevent a gun runner from selling a stolen stealth bomber to the highest bidder. You also see Famke Janssen in here, and also Malcolm McDowell, I believe, is the bad guy in this. And, ooh, excuse me. Ooh, good lord. Sorry about that, I had a burp. But here's the sad thing about this movie, is that the first half of it isn't a bad movie. It's not great, but I was laughing more and having more fun with it in the first half than I think a lot of people would have expected to with a film like this. I mean, this is a movie that definitely feels like they're clearly trying to copy the Lethal Weapon formula, even though this is based off a TV series of the 1960s, but it definitely feels like another one of those attempts to create the next big action comedy hit. And I thought for the first half of the movie, it was fine. It wasn't really doing anything spectacular or really funny. There's a couple of times where I did chuckle a little bit. I thought some of the jokes were working in the first half, and then as soon as the second half begins and they start doing what you expect for a movie like this, like you have a double-crosser agent, and you could pretty much figure it out who it's going to be right from the get-go as soon as you see him. And it's just like, right as soon as the second half of the movie begins, you know exactly which direction it's going to go. And this is not a long movie. This is only an hour-and-a-half long film. Like, this film, the moment you realize the ship is going down is right at the halfway mark. And it's just like, okay, I think we all know what's coming next. And this is just going to be one of those things where it's just really going to be bad in the end. And sure enough, it does fall into what you expect it to be. And it's just a big letdown, because the first half at least was showing some potential of what was going to happen in the movie that made it actually work. And it just wasn't there once the second reel began. Honestly, the more I think about it, I think the biggest reason why this movie failed specifically comes in its director, Betty Thomas, who, not to say this, not because she's a bad director, she's made great stuff, like the Brady Bunch movie, she made The Late Shift, she made Private Parts, Dr. Dolittle, John Tucker Must Die is a fun little film. She's done a couple of other notable films, such as Alvin the Chipmunks, The Squeakquel, and 28 Days, but most of those movies are comedies. This is a comedy, though, but it's more of an action comedy, and I don't think she was the right director for this. I mean, she can direct comedy pretty well, but you're asking her to direct action and comedy at the same time, and you need to really be good at those genres to really make something like this work. And I don't think she really has what it takes to do a film like this, but I think the reason why Sony got her was because of what she did with the Brady Bunch movie, quite honestly, which was a good movie, a really good movie, but it was more of it was a comedy. It was not really something where it wasn't expecting to be more elaborate than it needs to be. This is an action comedy where you have to have a good source of action and is a good source of how to do action sequences well, and I think that's one of the reasons why the film really suffers, is because this director really is not that good at directing some action sequences in here, because they're just pretty standard at the best and very bad at the very worst. Like, there are shots in here that are way too complicated than they need to be. There are moments in here where you're just like, you didn't really need to go to that nth level to really do that for a specific scene, and it just hurts the film in the long run, and it just really just adds to the problems with the film itself. Like I said, the first half I thought was fine. Maybe if there was something there in the second half and didn't go the predictable route and had maybe a better director, you probably would have had something good there to make the second half more bearable to watch. But as it is, it's a letdown of a film. I guess I could say it's better than the other two Eddie Murphy bombs he had this year, but not by that much. I'd say skip I Spy if you can. So with that said, we wrap up another edition of Time About the Movies, and the next time we meet, we'll take a look at Eminem's feature film debut and Curtis Hanson's 8 Mile. We also have Rebecca Romijn in the latest attempt to try to create the next Basic Instinct. I mean, we've spent, 10 years now trying to create the next Basic Instinct? None of it's really worked, but can Rebecca Romijn fix that with Femme Fatale? I should probably just tell you right now, no, she's not going to do that. But we also have Julianne Moore and Dennis Haysbert in Far From Heaven. So we'll take a look at those 3 films on the next episode. But until then, thank you so much for watching. And if you want to see more videos like this, please hit the playlist on the next page, check out the previous episode, and also don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this on this channel. So, with that said, I am off. I will see you guys next time, but until then, as always, take care.